In the vast emptiness between dying stars, where silence reigns absolute and darkness swallows hope itself, humanity had learned to survive where others could not. The year was 2387, and the galaxy had become a graveyard of civilizations, each one more advanced, more refined, more civilized than the last. Each one now nothing more than stellar dust and fading radiation signatures, all except one. The freighter Iron Resolve drifted through the asteroid field of what had once been the Veltarix homeworld, its hull scarred by decades of hard living and harder choices. Captain Jax Carver stood at the viewport, his weathered face illuminated by the pale glow of distant nebulae. At 42, he carried the weight of a man who had lost everything that mattered and found something worth fighting for in the ashes. Behind him, in the cramped quarters that served as both home and sanctuary, his 8-year-old daughter Emma slept fitfully. The nightmares came often now. Dreams of her mother's final moments aboard the research station at Proxima Tertius. Dreams of the Zephyrian war machines that had torn through the outer colonies like death itself made manifest. "Daddy?" Emma's voice, soft and vulnerable in the ship's perpetual twilight. "Are we safe here?" Jax turned, his expression softening as he knelt beside her makeshift bed. The Iron Resolve wasn't much, a Hercules-class cargo hauler past its prime, held together by determination and industrial-grade prayers, but it was theirs. Safe as anywhere in this galaxy, little star. Go back to sleep. But sleep, like peace, had become a luxury humanity could no longer afford. The proximity alarms screamed to life, their harsh melody cutting through the ship's ambient hum. Jax was on his feet and running for the bridge before the second chime, muscle memory and paternal instinct driving him forward. The scanner displays painted a grim picture, 3 Zephyrian interceptors, sleek and predatory, emerging from the shadow of a shattered moon. "Not today," he growled, hands dancing across the controls with practiced precision. The Iron Resolve might be old, but she was built by human hands, tough, stubborn, and utterly refusing to die quietly. The first interceptor opened fire, violet energy beams lancing through space where his ship had been mere heartbeats before. Jax threw the freighter into a spiraling dive toward the asteroid field, using the debris of a dead world as cover. Behind him, Emma had awakened to the familiar symphony of danger, the whine of overtaxed engines, the crack of stressed metal, the distant thunder of weapons fire. She didn't cry. Not anymore. At 8 years old, she had learned that tears were a luxury reserved for safer times. "Hold on, baby," Jax called over his shoulder, pulling the ship through a gap between 2 massive asteroids that should have been impossible to navigate. Should have been. But humans had a talent for doing the impossible when survival demanded it. The Zephyrians followed. Because of course they did. In their crystalline perfection and cold logic, they couldn't comprehend how a primitive cargo hauler piloted by a mere human could outmaneuver their superior technology. They would learn as so many others had learned before them. They would learn too late. Jax cut the engines and let momentum carry them deeper into the asteroid field, the ship's hull scraping against ancient stone with the sound of grinding teeth. The interceptors, built for open space combat, struggled to match his maneuvers in the tight confines of the debris field. One clipped an asteroid and spun away, trailing atmosphere and crystalline ether. The second died when Jax triggered a mining charge he'd placed 3 days earlier, a gift for anyone foolish enough to follow him into his chosen hunting ground. The explosion lit up the darkness like a newborn star, beautiful and terrible in its finality. The third interceptor pulled back, its pilot finally understanding what every other species in the galaxy had learned through bitter experience. Never corner a human with something to protect. As the Zephyrian ship retreated into the void, Jax allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. But the victory was hollow, temporary. They would be back. They always came back. "Daddy," Emma's voice was steady now, touched with curiosity rather than fear. "There's something on the scanners." Jax frowned, checking the displays. A faint energy signature almost lost in the background radiation of the dead system. Life support failing, power systems critical. Someone was dying out there in the cold and dark. Someone small. The debris field had claimed another victim. Small craft, barely larger than a shuttlecraft, wedged between 2 asteroids like a broken bird. Its hull bore markings he didn't recognize. Elegant curves and flowing script that spoke of a civilization far removed from human brutality or Zephyrian efficiency. "We should help them," Emma said, appearing at his elbow with the quiet grace she'd inherited from her mother. "Shouldn't we?" Jack stared at the dying ship, war and compassion battling in his chest. In this galaxy, kindness was often rewarded with death. Trust was a blade that more often cut the hand that offered it. But looking down at his daughter, at the hope that still burned in her eyes despite everything they'd endured, he found himself unable to say no. "Yeah, little star. We should." The docking was delicate work requiring precision that pushed both his skills and his ship to their limits. The alien craft's airlocks were different, operating on principles that seemed more art than engineering. But humans had a talent for adaptation, for making incompatible things work through sheer bloody-minded determination. When the seal finally engaged and atmosphere equalized, Jack stepped through with his sidearm drawn and his daughter safely behind the blast doors. The alien ship's interior was a study in elegant curves and bioluminescent panels, beautiful in a way that made human engineering seem crude by comparison. He found her in what might have been a cabin or might have been a meditation chamber. It was impossible to tell. She was young, perhaps equivalent to a human teenager, with skin that seemed to shift between silver and deep blue in the changing light. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal, but her eyes held the weight of stars. She looked up as he entered, those impossible eyes wide with something that might have been hope or might have been resignation. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. "Please," she whispered in accented but clear standard. "They're coming for me. They're always coming for me." And in that moment, looking at this strange, beautiful, terrified child floating in the ruins of her ship, Jackson Carver made a decision that would change the course of the galaxy. He holstered his weapon and offered his hand. "Not anymore," he said simply. "Not while I'm breathing." Behind him, Emma peered through the airlock, her young face solemn with understanding that no child should possess. The alien girl, for she was little more than a child, despite her ethereal appearance, looked from father to daughter with something like wonder dawning in her stellar eyes. "My name is Nixara," she said, accepting Jax's hand with fingers that felt impossibly delicate. "And I am so very far from home." As Jax helped her through the airlock and onto the iron resolve, neither of them noticed the small device that pulsed once, briefly, in the wreckage of her ship. A beacon, a tracking signal, a death sentence for them all. In the depths of space, beyond the edge of the galaxy itself, something vast and ancient stirred to wakefulness. Emperor Valthanos of the Cosmic Dominion felt the signal pulse through quantum space, felt it like a blade through his crystalline heart. His daughter, his lost, precious daughter. And she was with humans. The word tasted like ashes and broken dreams in his mind. Humans, the death world savages who refused to kneel, who turned every battlefield into a charnel house, who fought with the fury of dying stars and the stubbornness of gravity itself. They had taken his daughter, and for that their species would burn. 3 days had passed since Nixara had come aboard the Iron Resolve, and the ship had become something entirely different. Where once there had been the comfortable, worn familiarity of a working vessel, now there was an undercurrent of wonder and danger. The alien girl moved through the ship's corridors like liquid starlight, her presence transforming mundane metal into something approaching art. She spoke little of her past, offering only fragments, a home among the stars, a family of unimaginable power and hunters who would never stop coming for her. Emma had taken to their guest with the open-hearted acceptance that only children possessed. She taught Nixora human games, shared her treasured collection of Earth stories, and showed her how to navigate the ship's maze-like interior. In return, Nixora shared wonders of her own songs that made the air shimmer with impossible colors. Stories of civilizations that spanned star clusters and a gentle kind of magic that turned water into crystalline sculptures and made flowers bloom in the hydroponic bays. But Jax watched. Jax worried. And Jax planned. Because he had seen the way space itself seemed to bend around her when she was lost in thought. He had noticed how the ship's quantum drives hummed more smoothly in her presence, how damaged systems began to heal themselves when she passed nearby. This was no ordinary refugee. This was something far more dangerous. "She's not human," Emma said one evening as they shared dinner in the mess hall. Nexara had excused herself to what she called her starlight meditation, leaving father and daughter alone with the weight of unspoken truths. No, Jax agreed carefully. She's not, but she's scared, Emma continued, her 8-year-old wisdom cutting straight to the heart of things. Really, really scared. Like I was when the bad ships came to Mommy's station. Jax felt something clench in his chest. His daughter had never spoken so directly about that day, about watching her mother's research station burn while evacuation pods fled like seeds on the solar wind. Aim. She's running from something worse than the Zephyrians, isn't she? Emma's eyes, her mother's eyes, held a gravity that made Jax's heart ache. Something really bad is coming for her. Before Jax could answer, the ship's proximity alarms began their deadly song. But this time it wasn't the harsh electronic screech of the standard alert system. This time the alarms sang in harmonics that seemed to originate from the ship's quantum core itself, a sound like dying stars and the birth of black holes. Nexara appeared in the doorway, her silver-blue skin now blazing with patterns of light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The childlike wonder was gone from her face, replaced by something ancient and terrible and utterly alien. "They've found me," she whispered, and her voice carried the weight of galactic empires. "Oh, stars preserve us all. They found me." The scanner displays painted a picture that defied comprehension. Ships, dozens of them, materializing from quantum fold space with the precision of a military formation. But these weren't the elegant interceptors of the Zephyrians or the brutal dreadnoughts of the Zurian collective. These vessels seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime, their hulls shifting between dimensions like living things made of crystallized light and pure thought. At their center, dwarfing the escort fleet like a moon among pebbles, came something that made Jax's trained pilot instincts scream in primal terror. The flagship was less a ship than a piece of curved spacetime given form, beautiful and terrible and utterly beyond human comprehension. "The Eternal Throne," Nexara breathed, and now her voice held harmonics that made the ship's hull ring like a struck bell. "Father has come for me. Father." The word hit Jax like a physical blow. He turned to stare at the alien girl, the child who had transformed their ship into something approaching paradise, who had brought laughter back to his daughter's eyes, who had trusted them with her very life. "Your father," he said slowly. Pieces clicking into place with the inevitability of a neutron star collapse. "Your father is Emperor Valthanos of the Cosmic Dominion." It wasn't a question. It couldn't be a question, because the alternative was too terrible to contemplate. Nixarala's luminescent patterns dimmed, and for a moment she looked like nothing more than a frightened child again. "I never meant. I didn't want. I just wanted to be free." The communication systems activated without anyone touching them, quantum frequencies aligning themselves to receive a transmission from the flagship. When the signal resolved, the viewscreen filled with a presence that made the air itself seem thin and inadequate. Emperor Valthanos of the Cosmic Dominion was beautiful in the way that neutron stars were beautiful, perfect, terrible, and utterly destructive. His form seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, patterns of light and shadow that hurt to look at directly. When he spoke, reality itself seemed to listen. "Return my daughter, human." His voice resonated through quantum space, through the ship's hull, through the very atoms of Jax's bones. "Return her now, and your death will be swift." Jax stepped forward, placing himself between the viewscreen and Nixara, with the instinctive protectiveness that had kept him and Em alive through 3 years of galactic war. "She's not going anywhere. She doesn't want to go." The Emperor's laughter was like the sound of galaxies dying. "Do you comprehend what you face, little Deathworlder? I am the Lord of 10 million star systems. I command the loyalty of species whose names would drive you to madness. I have existed since before your son was born, and I will endure long after it has become cold ash in the void." "Yeah?" Jax's hand moved to the plasma rifle maglock to the bulkhead, muscle memory and desperation making the motion smooth and natural. "Well, I'm a dad, and that trumps Emperor every day of the week." Behind him, Emma had moved to stand beside Nixara, her small hand finding the alien girl's luminous fingers. Two children, human and alien, united in the face of cosmic power. The sight seemed to give the Emperor pause. "Nexara," Valthanos said, and now his voice held notes of genuine pain. "My precious daughter, my heir, why do you flee from your destiny? Why do you choose these primitives over your own blood?" Nyxera stepped forward, her inner light blazing brighter as she found her courage. "Because they don't try to control me, Father. Because they don't see me as a weapon to be wielded or a prize to be displayed. Because—" Her voice caught, and when she continued, it was with the simple honesty that only truth could carry. "Because they love me for who I am, not what I am." The Emperor's form seemed to waver, patterns of light shifting toward deeper shadows. "Love. You speak of love as if it were some kind of strength, as if it were worth the destruction I must now bring upon this system." "Love is strength," Emma said suddenly, her young voice carrying across quantum space with perfect clarity. "It's why my daddy fights so hard. It's why he never gives up. And it's why we won't let you hurt Nyxera." For a moment, just a moment, something that might have been uncertainty flickered across the Emperor's impossible features. But then his voice hardened, becoming as cold and implacable as the vacuum between stars. "So be it. You have chosen your path, my daughter. And you have chosen it in the company of the species that murdered your mother." The words hit the ship like a physical shockwave, and Nyxera staggered as if struck. "What? Did they not tell you, my precious one? Did they not explain why their kind is hunted across every civilized world? 3 years ago, at the research station in the Proxima system, human weapons tore through my beloved Sarah Lynn's diplomatic vessel. Your mother died in the cold dark, killed by the very species you now claim to love." Jax felt the universe tilt around him, past and present colliding with the force of a stellar collision. The research station at Proxima Tertius, his wife's last transmission cut short by weapons fire and the shriek of tearing metal. The elegant alien ship they'd found in the wreckage, diplomatic immunity ignored, passengers murdered, their noble intentions turned to cosmic dust. He had killed Nyxera's mother. The realization hit him like a quantum torpedo to the soul, and he saw his own horror reflected in his daughter's eyes. Emma had been there. Emma had watched the evacuation pods flee the dying station, had seen the alien ship burning alongside human habitats. They had killed her mother, and she had trusted them. She had loved them. "Nyxera," Jax began. But what words could possibly bridge such an abyss? The alien girl turned to face him, and in her stellar eyes he saw the death of wonder. The end of trust, the terrible understanding that love and betrayal could exist in the same heart, in the same moment, in the same desperate choice between survival and honor. "You knew," she whispered, and her voice carried the sound of breaking crystal. "All this time you knew." "Not until now," Jax said, and the truth tasted like ashes in his mouth. "I swear to you, not until this moment." But it was too late. The damage was done. The trust shattered beyond any hope of repair. Nyxera's inner light flickered and dimmed, and when she spoke again, her voice held the terrible finality of quantum collapse. "Take me back, Father," she said, not looking away from Jax's face. "I'm ready to come home." The transport beam engaged before anyone could move, before anyone could speak, before love or courage or desperate hope could change the mathematics of betrayal. Nyxera dissolved into patterns of light and quantum probability, leaving only the fading scent of starflowers and the echo of cosmic harmonics. And on the view screen, Emperor Velthanos smiled with the cold satisfaction of absolute victory. "Now," he said, his voice carrying the weight of dying suns, "you will learn what it means to harm the family of a god." The first wave of dreadnoughts opened fire, and the iron resolve screamed toward what seemed like certain death. The universe had become fire and fury and the terrible mathematics of war. The iron resolve twisted through a storm of quantum disruptors and dimensional torpedoes, her hull screaming under stresses that should have torn her apart. But she was built by human hands, forged in the foundries of Luna and tempered in the furnaces of necessity. She was ugly, outdated, and utterly refusing to die. Jax threw his ship through maneuvers that defied physics and common sense, using the asteroid field as both shield and weapon. Ancient chunks of planetary debris became projectiles launched by gravity wells and momentum, turning the graveyard of the Velterix homeworld into humanity's final battlefield. Behind him, Emma strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat with the grim competence of a child raised in war. Her small hands flew over the targeting controls, painting enemy ships with the precision of someone who had learned to kill before she learned to properly read. "Daddy," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "The big ship isn't shooting at us." She was right. The flagship, the Eternal Throne, hung in space like a dark jewel, its escort vessels doing the killing work while the Emperor watched. Waiting, planning something worse than mere destruction. "He wants us alive," Jax realized, the understanding hitting him like a cold wind. "He wants us to watch." The tactical display painted a grim picture. 300 ships of the Cosmic Dominion's finest, arranged in perfect formation around the asteroid field. Not attacking en masse, but herding, driving them toward something specific, toward a gap in the asteroid field that led to open space, to nowhere to run, to an execution ground. "Sir." The voice came from the ship's communication array, calm and professional despite the hell erupting around them. "This is Admiral Catherine Cross of the United Earth Navy. We're here to extract you." The scanner displays suddenly came alive with new contacts. Human ships materializing from quantum fold space with the precision of a military operation. Destroyers and frigates, their hulls scarred by years of fighting. Not many. Not nearly enough to face the Emperor's fleet, but enough to matter. Admiral Jax responded, throwing his ship into a diving turn that scraped paint from an asteroid surface. "Nice of you to drop by, but you're a little outgunned here." "So we are," Cross replied, and there was something in her voice, grim satisfaction perhaps, or the kind of peace that came with accepting impossible odds. "But that's never stopped us before." The human fleet spread out in a defensive formation that spoke of desperate courage and tactical brilliance. They couldn't win. Everyone knew they couldn't win. The Cosmic Dominion's technology was centuries ahead of anything humanity possessed. Their ships more art than engineering. Their weapons capable of rewriting the laws of physics on a local scale. But humans had learned long ago that winning wasn't always the point. Sometimes the point was simply refusing to lose quietly. The battle that followed would be remembered in the archives of a dozen species as the moment humanity proved, once and for all, that advancement and intelligence meant nothing in the face of stubborn refusal to yield. Admiral Cross's flagship, the dreadnought Terra's Pride, took point against odds that would have made gods weep. Her escorts formed up in a wall of steel and determination that threw itself against the Emperor's perfect formations like a tide of molten fury. Human ships died. Human ships died by the dozens, their hulls torn open by weapons that existed partially outside normal space. But for every human vessel that fell, it took 2 or 3 of the Emperor's elegant killers with it, ramming attacks and overloaded reactors, turning ships into improvised weapons, turning defeat into a kind of terrible victory. And through it all, the iron resolve ran, not from cowardice, but from necessity. Because Jax had realized something that changed everything. He had seen the way Nixara's presence affected his ship's systems. He had watched quantum drives stabilize and damaged components repair themselves. He had witnessed the impossible become routine in the presence of someone who existed partially outside the normal rules of reality. She wasn't just the Emperor's daughter. She was the living key to the Cosmic Dominion's power. "Emma," he called over the sound of weapons fire and dying ships, "I need you to do something for me. Something important." His daughter looked up from the targeting controls, her young face solemn with understanding. "What do you need, Daddy?" "I need you to send a message. Not through our communications array, they're probably listening. Through the quantum beacon and emergency kit. 7. The one your mom designed." Emma's eyes widened with comprehension. Her mother had been Dr. Alexis Carver, quantum physicist and communication theorist. The emergency beacon was based on her theories of quantum entanglement across galactic distances, theories that had died with her at Proxima Tertius, theories that might now save the galaxy. "What kind of message?" Emma asked, her fingers already moving toward the emergency locker. "Tell them what we've learned," Jax said, throwing his ship through another impossible maneuver. "Tell them about Nyx Sora. Tell them that the Emperor's power isn't technology, it's her. She's the living connection that holds the Dominion together." Emma's understanding dawned like a small sun. "If she's gone, if she chooses to be gone," Jax corrected, "the Dominion falls apart. All those perfect ships, All that impossible technology. It depends on her connection to maintain quantum coherence across galactic distances. The message went out on frequencies that shouldn't exist, carried by quantum pairs that had been separated across impossible distances. It would reach every human colony, every resistance cell, every desperate last stand being fought in the darkness between stars. And perhaps it would reach someone who could do something about it. On the flagship Eternal Throne, Emperor Velthanos felt the quantum transmission as a ripple through the cosmic substrate. His perfect features twisted into something approaching concern as he realized what the humans had discovered. "Nixera," he said, turning to face his daughter where she stood in the observation chamber, watching her former friends fight and die in the void. "They know." The alien girl. No, the young woman, for she seemed to have aged years in the span of minutes, nodded slowly. "I felt the message. They understand what I am, what I mean to you, to all of this." She gestured toward the vast fleet arrayed around them. "Then you understand why I cannot let them live," the Emperor said, his voice carrying infinite sadness and absolute resolve. "They have seen too much, learned too much. The secret of the Dominion's power cannot be allowed to spread." Nixera was quiet for a long moment, watching as another human ship, a small frigate called Defiant Heart, threw itself against one of the Dominion's heavy cruisers in a kamikaze attack that left both vessels spinning wreckage. When she spoke, her voice held harmonics that made the flagship's quantum core resonate in sympathy. "What if I went with them willingly?" The Emperor's form seemed to freeze, patterns of light and shadow becoming utterly still. "What? What if I chose exile? What if I severed my connection to the Dominion permanently? Would you let them live then?" For the first time in eons, Emperor Velthanos too looked genuinely shaken. "My daughter, you cannot comprehend what you suggest. Without your connection, the Dominion would fragment. 10 million worlds would lose their quantum coherence. Entire star systems would be free," Nixera finished softly. "Free to choose their own destinies. Free to love who they wish. Free to make their own mistakes." She turned to face him fully, and in her stellar eyes burned a light that was purely her own. "Free the way you never let me be." The implications hit the Emperor like a collapsing waveform. Without Nixera's connection, his vast empire would indeed crumble, not into chaos but into independence. Billions of beings across thousands of species would suddenly find themselves free from the quantum substrate that bound them to his will, free to be human in their own ways. "They killed your mother," he said desperately. "They are primitives, savages, barely evolved beyond their death-world origins. How can you choose them over your own people?" Nixera looked out at the battle raging in the void, at the human ships dying with impossible courage, at the iron resolve still running through a maze of asteroids and enemy fire. She thought of Jax's careful kindness, of Emma's innocent wonder, of 3 days aboard a cargo hauler that had felt more like home than any palace among the stars. "Because," she said simply, "they showed me what love looks like when it's freely given." The Emperor's voice became the sound of dying galaxies. "If you do this, if you sever the connection, you will age and die as they do. You will become mortal, vulnerable, small. Is their approval worth surrendering godhood?" Nixera smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the frightened child who had first stepped aboard the Iron Resolve. "Ask me again in 60 years. And with that she reached deep into the quantum substrate that connected her consciousness to 10 million worlds, found the threads of power that made her father an emperor and made herself a goddess, and began to cut them, one by one. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Across the Dominion fleet, ships began to lose quantum coherence, their elegant curves becoming crude metal and ceramic. Weapon systems that had operated on principles beyond human comprehension suddenly became simple particle beams and fusion torpedoes. Advanced became merely adequate. Perfect became flawed. Gods became mortal. And in the asteroid field where humanity had made its desperate stand, Admiral Cross's voice carried across all frequencies with the kind of joy that only came from impossible victories snatched from the jaws of certain defeat. All ships. The enemy fleet is losing power. Press the attack. Make them remember why you don't mess with Earth." The battle turned in moments. Dominion ships that had seemed invulnerable suddenly found themselves outgunned by human tenacity and crude but effective weapons. The elegant formations dissolved into chaos as quantum communication networks failed and ship commanders found themselves isolated, alone, and very suddenly mortal. Emperor Velthanos watched his empire crumble in real time, felt his godlike power bleeding away like atmosphere from a ruptured hull. When he turned to face his daughter, his perfect features showed something they had never held before: genuine humanity. "My precious star," he whispered. And his voice was just a voice now, no longer resonating with cosmic authority. "What have you done?" "What I should have done years ago," Nyxera replied. And though her inner light was dimming as mortality claimed her, she had never looked more radiant. "I chose my own path." She closed her eyes and reached out through space, her fading consciousness touching the quantum beacon aboard the Iron Resolve. One last message, sent not through technology but through the dying echoes of her cosmic nature. "Thank you for everything. I'm coming home." On the bridge of the cargo hauler, Jax felt the message arrive like a whisper of starlight. Around him, the Dominion fleet was in full retreat, their perfect ships limping away from a battle they should have won easily. But his attention was focused entirely on the small life pod that had just separated from the flagship, following a trajectory that would bring it to the asteroid field. To him, "Daddy," Emma said, her voice bright with wonder and hope. "Is that her?" Jax smiled, the first genuine smile he'd worn since his wife's death, and began plotting an intercept course. "Yeah, little star, that's her." The Iron Resolve intercepted the life pod 12 minutes later, docking with the gentle precision of someone bringing something precious home. When the airlock cycled and Nyxera stepped through, she looked different. Smaller somehow, more fragile, but her eyes still held starlight, and when she smiled it was with the pure joy of someone who had chosen mortality over godhood and found the trade worthwhile. "Hello," she said to Jax, and her voice was just a voice now, beautiful, musical, but bound by the same physical laws that governed all living things. "I was wondering, is that offer of sanctuary still open?" Jax stepped forward and wrapped her in the kind of hug that spoke of family chosen rather than born, of love freely given rather than demanded by blood or power. "Always," he said simply. "For as long as you want it." Behind them, Emma launched herself into the embrace with the uninhibited joy of a child who had found her sister among the stars. And for the first time in 3 years, the Iron Resolve felt truly complete. In the months that followed, the collapse of the cosmic dominion would reshape the galaxy. 10 million worlds would find themselves free to chart their own courses, to make their own mistakes, to discover their own versions of happiness. Some would stumble, some would but all would be free. And on a cargo hauler somewhere between the core worlds and the outer rim, 2 fathers would teach their daughters about courage and kindness, and the peculiar human notion that family was something you built rather than something you were born into. The galaxy would never be the same. But then again, neither would they.